Welcome to UFHL Now! A close-up look at the ultimate fantasy hockey league. The most realistic fantasy gameplay. High stakes. High reward. Here's your host, the owner of Duckman's domination in the UFHL, and the mighty Mallards of the UFAHL, Dean Millard.
Hey there and welcome. Thank you very much for tuning in to this special live edition of UFHL Now here on the greatest fantasy sports network, UFSN. We have great programming coming and we have a fantastic show lined up for you. If you do want to get in touch with the network, it's at UFS Network, and you can send an email, ufsn@uffsports.com. and somebody will get right back to you. And if you want to follow future champions of the UFHL, Duckman's Domination, it's right there at Ducks Domination on Twitter. We have a big day when it comes to voting. We are going to be revealing some results from the votes today and whether or not we will see some changes. We're also going to chat trophies, UFHL cap system, and international events. Mind-blowing international events that I think, I think people are really, really going to love this news when UFHL insider Larry Fisher brings that to us. He's also going to talk about some deals, players on the block, and some new signings that will impact UFHL teams in the big picture for sure. So we're going to get to all of that in just 1 second. Before we do, just a quick rant by me. I like to take advantage of this time I have every Friday to give a little bit of a rant. The voting. Almost everybody voted. Almost. It was so close.
Missed it by that much.
But unfortunately, this deserves to be rung for some franchises that did not vote today.
Shame. Shame. Shame.
I said this in the Telegram chat. It's not that hard. The minutes were there. The video, the audio is there. A lot of people went to a lot of work to make sure you had the information. And then you have 24 hours to get your vote. Don't wait until the 24-hour period to start researching. Do that ahead of time. This has to be pounded in. This is professional fantasy sports. Look at the money that is being spent. This has to be taken seriously. You would never see a professional team not vote. Miss a vote. We need to make sure, and we were very close, but close is not good enough. We need every franchise voting. I am strongly in favor of fines for franchises that do not vote. That certainly will be the case when we get into UFLB, when the baseball league starts up. That will be something that we will be talking about and implementing. But this is a very important issue. We need everybody voting on everything in this matter. Okay, rant over. Let's bring in the big man now. UFHL insider Larry Fisher on UFHL Now.
Time to get the scoop on the UFHL with our insider, Larry Fisher. He's had lines in the water all week long. What will he reel in for us today? Let's dive in and find out what's going on with the UFHL. Now!
All right, as I bring in the UFHL insider, Larry Fisher, and, sometimes I feel like a parent with these rants that I go on this show. But, hey, when you're one of the few guys that has the opportunity to rant on these shows, you got to take advantage of it. And I just think that this is a natural progression step that we need to get to where nobody is missing votes and nobody is missing out on the research and the changes that are happening. Maybe it still needs to transition more. I thought we might have been there with the amount of money that was being spent, but I think it's huge. I think everybody needs to make sure that their vote is made and cast, and then they can say, at least I voted on this or this or this.
And as you'll see, Dean, a number of these topics came down to a vote here or there that could have swung. Obviously, we didn't need the last vote. 31 out of 32 franchises voted both on round 1 and round 2. So like you said, we're that close, but close isn't good enough in professional fantasy sports. Your rant was bang on. I agree that would never happen in a professional league, that they would forget to vote or simply miss the vote for whatever reason or opt not to vote. It's your responsibility as a franchise owner to be informed and to make and have a say in this league. Franchises don't want things changing without a say. Well, here's the chance to have your say, and hopefully no more franchises will pass it up. And I do think, Dean, it's only a matter of time until the UFHL also adopts fines for failing to vote. I think that's the direction the league will go, and hopefully we're going to have a lot more votes, Dean, between now and the end of September. Mm-hmm. We still have, at least 2 more rounds of voting coming out of meeting 1, which will be this coming week before Friday. And then we go into meeting 2 and we'll have a week of voting. And then we'll have meeting 3 with another week of voting. And there's going to be, 3-4 rounds or topics that, follow up votes. This is a busy month with the off-season owners meetings. And it really is the responsibility of the franchises to, shape the direction of this league. And you do that by voting.
Yeah, and, we will hopefully get to a point down the road, life not getting in the way with travel restrictions likely coming back in again. But, maybe there's a point where these meetings will be happening over a 3-day period in, let's say, Boca Raton, Florida, for an example, or anywhere. And we do these meetings in person and voting, and attendance will be mandatory, or you would never see somebody from the NHL, like the Oilers, being like, we're going to skip this meeting. No, it's serious. And eventually that's where this league is getting to. There will not be people, because if you don't pay attention, you will be left behind. So we're getting there. And listen, I congratulate the owners that did vote. And hopefully the rest of the voting, it gets drilled in that we get 100% voter turnout. Man, wouldn't the federal election like to even have our voter turnout for what we're doing? But anyway, let's get on to the stuff that we're actually talking about, that we're voting. So take us through round 2, some of the things that were being talked about, and then I'll bring in the results as we go, and we will reveal them on this live show.
For sure, Dean. So obviously the main topics for round 2 of the voting was whether or not to add penalties drawn or drawn penalties, whether to award additional points for fights. Is fights a separate category that has its own weighting, that if a fight is worth more than a minor penalty or an additional point, and then whether to lower penalty minutes, because obviously if you trip somebody, that's a little different than it's not changing the momentum in a good way. So should normal minor penalties or penalty minutes be lowered in the scoring system? So those were the 3 items up for voting, Dean, in round 2. And we can start with penalties drawn, and you can bring up the results. We can do the big reveal here, and everybody can see it, because this is the first time the UFHL franchises are seeing the results of round 2 voting. So there you see it, Dean. Item number 1 was penalties drawn. Do you want penalties drawn to be added? And changes are coming to the UFHL, as you can see looking at these results. Penalties drawn, yes. Franchises want to reward players that draw a penalty, because that does give your team a power play, and it should have value. Do you want a new fights point category added as a separate category? Again, Dean, yes, 23-8. So you can see, you needed 22 out of 32 in favor in order to pass these. It is 2/3 majority of expected votes, which is 32. So 22 out of 32 had to vote in favor. And all 3, Dean, got the necessary number of votes as we extended the deadline to make sure we got additional votes in. Mm-hmm. The item 3 was penalty minutes. Do you want to lower the current penalty minutes value from 0.5 points per penalty minute? And again, 23 out of 31 voters were in favor. So yeses across the board for adding penalties drawn, adding fights, and lowering penalty minutes.
And listen, I think that's why voting is so important, because look how close that was. And you'll have to refresh my memory, but there was something, I believe it might have been with the scouting that we were voting on, that missed by one vote, and I don't believe everybody voted. So it is definitely proof. These things got through by the kind of the skin of their teeth here.
They did, Dean, because 21 yeses wouldn't have been enough. It needed to be 22. So, yeah, you can see penalties drawn got in with 22, the exact amount needed, and both fights and lower penalty minutes got in with 23. So just barely enough. And you're right, Dean, going back to the round of voting ahead of the entry auction for the UFHL's version of the NHL draft, the scouts had submitted some proposals. And in one case, the proposal, I believe the voting, Dean, was 19-5. Or something like that, but they needed that 22, and because 5 or 6 franchises didn't vote in that round of voting, therefore it didn't get to 22, and it is majority of expected votes, so it's always out of 32 votes, whether 25 vote or 32 vote. So if you get less total franchises voting, then you still need the 22 minimum to pass. So hopefully you get all 32 voting, like you said, on a regular basis, and then you have the full league represented, because if those other 5 or 7 franchises had voted, maybe that 19 was 22 or 23, and maybe the entry auction, the UFHL's version of the NHL draft would have been conducted slightly different this past July, I guess, just last month. But going forward, certainly you want a full turnout as far as voting participation goes.
All right, so we almost got it. We didn't, but this does deserve the shame bell for somebody missing the vote.
Shame. Shame. Shame.
So, and it was the Warriors franchise, I believe, that missed the vote in the final one.
Yeah, Sean Cosgrove missed the final. He was the final vote in round 2, and Terry Weber of Strong Island was the other shame bell recipient as the final vote missing in round 1. So
yes, we have to spread out the shame.
Yeah, hopefully they'll be on the ball for rounds 3 and 4 coming up this coming week, Dean, before meeting number 2.
Yeah, how will they ever live down the shame bell from UFHL Now? We'll never know. Well, maybe they'll vote next time and they won't get it. So you want to move on to what we're going to be voting on for the round 3 of voting now, Larry?
Definitely, Dean. So because the decisions that were made in round 2, obviously now we need to vote on the values, because there was results to change values or add categories. So round 3, penalties drawn, the value, it was kind of a part 2 to round 2, and there was actually 3 options. It was 0.5, 0.2, or 0.1. They were close, so we have to do a runoff vote between 0.2 and 0.5 to determine the value for penalties drawn. And then there will also be follow-up votes on both penalty minutes, because the current value is 0.5. It's going down, we know that. Is it going down to 0.25, 0.2? The franchises will have a follow-up vote on, to be determined, the values they'll be voting on, but there'll be a vote there, as well as the value of fights, Dean. Is it going to be, if you get in a fight, is that worth 1 fantasy point? Is it worth 0.5? Is it worth, how much is a fight as a category going to be worth? So those are the to be determined items in the round 3 of voting. And then the new items, the new topics, obviously we're going to decide on the values of those 3 categories. We're also going to address, do you want to change the value of hits, which is currently 0.25, and do you want to change the value of shots, which is currently 0.2? So again, penalties drawn is going to fall somewhere in the middle there. We will talk about blocked shots here in a second, which was round 1 of voting. And then, Dean, from there, from round 3, there's still going to be a round 4. If people do vote in favor, as we've seen today, we had all yeses across the board for penalties drawn, penalty minutes lowering, and adding fights. If the franchises do vote in favor of changing the value of hits and shots, round 4 would then go through those values, and you'd have options as to how you want to adjust those values, what the new value should be going forward. As well, in round 4, which will be later in the week, do you want to add time on ice stats, and do you want to make any changes to the goalie stats? So there's still some follow-up voting. There's still plenty of opportunity for the Warriors in Strong Island to redeem themselves ahead of meeting number 2, Dean, which is next Saturday, September 11th at 4 p.m. Eastern.
I really hope they do, because I cannot wait to play the Dumb and Dumber clip where they totally redeemed themselves by voting. So we'll have that one, as long with anybody else who misses the voting. We'll have the shame bell for them as well. But I think we really hashed out some good things in that last owners meeting, and I can't wait to the next ones as well. I mean, the idea of a quality start is, to me, it's a no-brainer when it comes to goaltending. I'll be honest, in baseball, the value of a win is a lot less than a value of a quality start, because that determines the individual's performance. And you heard my rant about plus minus, that it's a team stat. You know what, I would, if you said to me down the road, we replaced wins with quality starts, I wouldn't even have a problem with that, because it's going on an individual. But this isn't just my league. There's 31 other voices, and I love that a lot of them were heard and made their opinions. Some of them changed my mind on things, and that's what I love about this league, is there's productivity. It's not just us sitting around for 3 hours talking about doing one thing. There was a lot of things discussed and will be. So bravo to everybody who brought their ideas forward in those, and will be continuing to bring them forward in the future.
And certainly inspired change, Dean. You look at the round 2 voting results, it was yeses across the board, 100% in favor of the 3 changes that they were able to vote on. They wanted to change all 3 items. And then if we look back, Dean, to the round 1 voting results, reviewing the first round of voting results, more changes. And in this one was very unanimous almost, Dean. Blocked shots to be added this season. 30 in favor. There was only one dissenter. We're not sure who the dissenter was, but 30 out of 31 franchises that voted were in favor of adding blocked shots for the coming season. So blocked shots will be in, and then they also voted on the value there, Dean, as an item 2, and blocked shots will be valued at 0.25 in favor of the 20 out of 20 to 11 was the voting result there, Dean, but 20 in favor of 0.25. Which heading into this round 3 of voting, it would put block shots value equivalent to hits. Hits are currently 0.25, and both a blocked shot and a hit would be worth more than a shot on goal, currently at 0.20 for a shot on goal. So that's kind of interesting where blocks would fit into the picture. And then, Dean, item 3, which is very important, which certainly impacts rounds 2 and 3 and 4 and subsequent voting. When should future values be applied for, when should these values, so when we vote on these changes, do they come in the upcoming season? Do they come in 3 seasons out, or do they come in gradually? And the winner, Dean, there was a runoff here for the 3 seasons out. 6 votes had to revote, and all of them voted in favor of gradually. So it ended up actually being 21 for gradually and 10 for the upcoming season. So all changes will be implemented gradually, which means 33% adjustment for each year, for each season over 3 seasons. So again, so if fights comes in as a category, if penalty minutes are lowered as the value, they say they were going from 0.2 or 0.5 down to 0.2. They wouldn't just start there this coming season. They might go down to 0.4, then 0.3, then 0.2 for their final value or full value in season 3. So that was an important vote. I think item 3 stands out to me, Dean, as the franchise is voting in favor of gradually reducing the categories. So not all at once, not up front, and not all at once 3 years later. Because what I mentioned in the meeting, Dean, is I think as long as that value stays the same for those 3 seasons, the value of the players stays the same, and nobody's going to gradually start reshaping the roster until they have to. So if the value of the points are gradually changing, then there's more incentive to gradually change your roster, because the values are going down or up from season to season. So I think we will see more gradual roster changes, as opposed to, obviously, if it was this upcoming season, we would have seen a big panic, right? There's only a month left to reshape your roster if there was big changes. And if it was only going to take effect 3 seasons out, I think a lot of franchises would have held on to those players at their current value and not made any changes until that offseason after 3 seasons, when then they're in that panic mode or last minute mode to get rid of those players that no longer have value. Certainly the contending franchises wouldn't trade a player that, if penalty minutes are valued high, they wouldn't trade that player until the actual value changed. So by using this gradual system, I think was the best way to go for the franchises, and I'm glad they chose that route because I think it will allow for gradual roster change as well.
It's also interesting for teams that are rebuilding, and hopefully we're finished with our rebuild after this coming season, and we're contending for a playoff spot in 22-23. But it also for a team that is in a couple of year rebuild, it allows them for new categories to gradually start looking at those guys instead of having to race out and grab a guy for a penalty change. Just the same thing as a kind of a contending team, and I gotta say I love. Other than the one missed vote, 30 in favor of a statistical category that should have been there. That is good news. Like 30-1.
It's a rout. It's a blowout.
It was a blowout in that one. So I was really impressed in that it looks like, the entire league minus one realizes the value of block shots. And I love that we're working hard to bring value to all players. And I mean, this has been a really interesting study for somebody like me as well, who is right in the middle of building baseball with the Ultimate Fantasy League Baseball and learning about some of these things and saying, okay, that's something we can kind of implement as far as statistical categories, because I think that's a great decision. So it's been a really interesting study in how a professional league handles itself. So I'm very happy. And even as we talk about the shame for missing votes, it's still pretty amazing that we're getting this much voter turnout on these important decisions. So bravo to the league on those decisions and future decisions as well. And then we had another bit of a poll, and we can jokingly say that one person was against this idea, but Nick, obviously, he joked around that he didn't understand it. Sounds like everybody's in favor of getting a Founders Trophy for everybody, for the winners, rather, to keep.
Yeah, so with the Klein Cup, Dean, the playoff champion, the UFHL's version of the Stanley Cup, you get the trophy sent to you for the off season, just like the Stanley Cup. You get your day with the cup, your week, your month with the cup, and then you send it back to the Founders. They have it in a nice case, and it's gift wrapped for the next champion the following season. With the Founders Trophy, Dean, which it goes to the winner or the leader of the regular season standing. So first place in the regular season, equivalent to the President's Trophy in the NHL. That trophy is not a physical trophy right now. It's just it will be an NFT replica that goes with your franchise into your franchise wallet, showing that you're a former regular season winner of the UFHL on the UFFS platform on the website. But the question was, do you want a physical trophy? And you're right, Dean. It was quite overwhelmingly in favor of having the physical trophy. People like to put something on the mantle to show off their fantasy success, even though, people will say that in the real world, the only trophy that matters is the Stanley Cup. But in the fantasy world, as we see from the regular season payouts, in some sense, Dean, the true champion is the regular season winner. Mm-hmm. In fantasy. So certainly that award has value, has meaning, and the franchises would like to get their hands on that trophy. And in this case, Dean, it would be a new replica made every year. So they would add a plate to it with an engraved of your franchise name and year that you won, and then you would get to keep that award. And then the next year they would add another plate for whoever won that year and engrave it, and it would be sent out. So rather than engraving all on the same one and sending it back and forth from the league to the winning franchise and only having it temporarily, now you get to keep the Founders Trophy. And it is exciting that, Dean, that UFFS is partnering with Trophy Smack. And this company specializes in custom fantasy sports trophies. That's what they do. As you can see here on their website, some of the awards they have for hockey leagues already, what they look like. This company, Dean, Trophy Smack, actually made an appearance on Shark Tank, which is similar to Dragon's Den and those type of shows. And actually, Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, invested in Trophy Smack. And so UFFS is partnering with Trophy Smack for all physical trophies going forward, including the UFAFL Football Championship Trophy will probably be the first one done by Trophy Smack. And UFFS, though, as we mentioned, will also create NFTs, replica NFTs of the trophy that will go into your UFFS franchise wallet as well. But a big step for the league to form this partnership with Trophy Smack and to be presenting physical trophies for the different champions, both for playoffs. Obviously, we have the Klein Cup, but now the Founders Trophy for the regular season. And the Grizzlies, Dean, they were the inaugural 2020 COVID regular season winner for the UFHL, and this past season was the Ice Vikings. So both the Grizzlies for 2020 and the Ice Vikings for 2021, they will receive a championship trophy to keep and to have as the Founders Trophy winners from the past 2 seasons.
And, we love to mirror as much about the leagues that our sports are based on. And we do that with the Founders and the President's Trophy, because the Founders Trophy has not won the Klein Cup in 2 years. And that happens quite a bit in the NHL, as you know, Larry. The President's Trophy winner is oftentimes not the Stanley Cup champion. So just like real life, that is mirroring. And as you mentioned, the regular season is a marathon. The playoffs, as grueling as they are in the real world, is a sprint. And in our league, you get rewarded for the marathon as far as payouts, but it's up to each owner to determine which trophy is more important to them. And I think that's awesome. I'm loving the partnership. I have a meeting set up, a call with Matt next week to talk baseball trophies. So I'm really, really excited about that. And another partnership that we have on the go as well. And, I've been a fan of this website and this gentleman, and I had him on some of my previous podcasts. So I'm excited about the potential with this one as well. So tell us about what might be happening with Puckpedia.
Yeah, Dean, Puckpedia preparing cap pages for the UFHL, which is something the UFHL franchises have been asking for. Probably at least half the franchises have requested or inquired, when are we going to get this information, and will the league ever provide this information? And Hertl, the founder of Puckpedia, Dean, who is already working with UFFS in an ambassador and recruiter role. He's helping bring on some NHL agents and some NHL players and minor pro and junior players, trying to make those connections to get some more digital athlete NFTs from the hockey world. Hart's been a real advocate for UFFS and out there helping us spread the word about UFFS. And now taking the partnership to the next level, Puckpedia is working to develop those franchise cap pages for all the UFHL franchises, which would be hosted on Puckpedia. Here you can see, Dean, this is what the salary cap breakdown looks like currently on Puckpedia for the NHL franchises. So you'd be looking at something similar for the UFHL, which obviously shows your cap hit as well as your term for all your players, which is so important, Dean, because the UFHL does mirror the full NHL cap system, including term. And when you're looking at Fantrax, all you see is that season. Look at a guy like Darnell Nurse. It'll show $5.6 million. If you don't know that he's signed for $9.25 million next season, and Fantrax, Dean, they don't update their contracts in real time as we're experiencing this offseason. All the cap hits on Fantrax are still the previous season. They haven't updated for the coming season. So it's really hard for franchises to know where they stand in the salary cap world unless they have their own spreadsheet, their own version of My Puckpedia, or some are using Cap Friendly, or Dylan Wheaton obviously had used his Excel spreadsheet skills to make some of these pages for some franchises. But now the plan is to partner with Puckpedia and to provide a section on the Puckpedia website for the UFHL franchises, so they all have access to this salary cap information, and it would work in real time. If you make a trade, the trade would be updated on Puckpedia by the commissioner or by an admin, and everything would be reflected. So you could always check on your franchise's salary cap situation at any time, and not find out mid-September when Fantrax updates that, oh no, I'm 10 million over the cap. Right now, it's the franchise's responsibility to be tracking that themselves through whatever means or whatever platform. But going forward, the plan is that the league will provide salary cap information for all franchises, and planning to partner with Puckpedia to provide that service.
Yeah, and it's huge. And as you've been saying, everybody should have their own spreadsheet, and some have taken it to elite levels. I mean, the one that Alex LeBlanc had going at the trade deadline, it inspired me to improve mine. I'm like, wow, mine actually sucks compared to some of these that are out there. And that does come in, I refer to that constantly, updating it with my franchises and caps with new deals, like the Colton Parayko deal that we'll talk about later. But it's so nice nice to be able to see other teams and for me to find out, like I experienced that. I went through Fantrax and sent out a whole bunch of messages to teams about their cap space because it was showing that they had zero almost, and they were like, no, I'm good. And so to be able to know about other teams, and the other thing it might bring in to play here, Larry, is salary retention. If we're gonna I'm gonna make a trade and I'm gonna keep some salary, it's really hard to figure that out because none of the other sites are doing that for us. We create our own ecosystem. So this is just a massive step. It would be another feather in the cap of UFFS, in my opinion, to be giving kind of that top shelf treatment to their fantasy leagues. So bravo to the partnership on this one. It's going to be wonderful, and I really look forward to it.
And you made a good point there, Dean, about potentially incorporating salary retention trades in the future. It was tabled last offseason. It's not on the agenda for this coming season or for this coming Saturday's meeting, which will talk about transactions and rosters and that topics of that nature. I don't believe it's on the agenda, so it won't be revisited this offseason. But with a tool like Puckpedia is building, that could potentially become a talking point again, because we'd have the ability to incorporate that. But I think, like you said, Dean, just these partnerships separating UFFS and the Ultimate Fantasy Hockey League from the pack, right? We've talked a lot about Instat and the access to Instat, which is such a valuable tool. We're so happy to have Instat as the title sponsor for the UFHL, but now having Puckpedia providing the salary cap information, Dean, it is something that really establishes the UFFS platform as the industry leader among professional fantasy sports, because nowhere else are you going to sign up for join a fantasy league and they're like, oh, here's your franchise salary cap breakdown, and it's always do it on your own, and here's something that we can provide more value added tools is something that UFFS is always looking at, and certainly incorporating our partners and rewarding our partners, Dean. As we mentioned in last week's show, the plan is to, as part of this partnership, to perhaps name the GM of the Year award, the Puckpedia GM of the Year award in the UFHL. So there's kind of value both ways in these partnerships, but certainly we look forward to continuing to work with Puckpedia and hopefully being able to implement these franchise cap pages for the upcoming season. I know Hart is hopeful we could get it ready for opening night, October 12th, but if not, within the first month of the season. So this is hopefully becoming an imminent change or an imminent service tool that will be available to UFHL franchises thanks to Puckpedia.
Well, the best partnerships, like the best trades, are ones where both parties come away happy. And, I've made several of those trades in this league, and it's great to have those partnerships. And we can value or offer a lot of value, especially with, some of the things that are being worked on and being developed that will be revealed to everybody in some of the big projects that we have going. I think there will be definite value on both ends, the value that we're getting from partners like Puckpedia and the value we can give them as well. And one of those things that I am so excited about, and we talk about there's some really big picture things happening, and then there's some things that we get to talk about right now that are so exciting. And I'm talking about international events. So tell us a little bit about the potential plans for some of these events that could be ongoing.
So again, the off season's all about brainstorming, and the brain trust of the UFHL, led by the commissioner, Andrea Karanduk, as well as Nathan Bender. They've been hard at work mapping out doing preliminary planning for how could we incorporate the World Juniors and the Olympics. And of course, today it's such a talking point because it was announced that the NHLers are officially going back to the Olympics for this coming year in 2022. And UFFS would really like to incorporate those international events, those national team events, into fantasy gameplay, and there's nowhere that really does that right now. As far as there's the bracket challenges and picking the teams and the winners, but there's nowhere, certainly, Dean, that does a dynasty style international competition leagues, and that's what we're looking to do here. So the way it would work, Dean, or the plans, tentative plans anyway, would be to turn the World Juniors and the Olympics into dynasty leagues, which would start by auctioning off franchises. So it'd be the same amount as the entrance to the tournament. So for the men's Olympics, that would be 12 franchises. And for the World Juniors would be 10 franchises. The winner, obviously, of those franchise auctions being Dynasty would keep their franchise forever and be able to use it in every tournament. So the World Juniors, you'd have a franchise every year in the tournament. The Olympics, you'd have every 4 years. Certainly potential to go to, men's world championships, men's under 18s, Hlinka Gretzky Cup, all the rest. At any time, if you wanted to sell your international franchise, you could, obviously. Each franchise would create their own country name and flag, so that would kind of be a cool aspect. And because the way that would work, Dean, with the draft is the plan would be to do a full draft the first year. So you draft all the players that are at that year's World Juniors or this upcoming Olympics, and then you would keep your players that you draft from year to year as long as they are on the team in the real world events. But you would also have an annual draft to fill the holes in your roster from players you lost from the previous year, players that are aging out, players that didn't make the cut the next time around, whatever the case, you would fill those spots. But you would draft your full roster, and if they're 15-year-old kid and they're going to play in 4 World Juniors, you get them every year in the World Juniors. So very cool how that would work. You'd host an annual draft, as we mentioned. The plan would be to allow trades during the round robin portion of the tournament potentially, and then also allow the trades of the players' rights during the off season or in between tournaments. So you could really be reshaping your international roster during the wait for the next tournament. So it would give some ongoing gameplay. The players, Dean, would be owned by scouts or franchises already. So those scouts and franchises would be leasing their players and would make a percentage of the winnings based on the percentage of fantasy points contributed by your players. So that's a really cool part of how this could work as a dynasty. And then as far as prize pool, Dean, obviously gold, silver, bronze makes sense. As usual, the medalists, the top 3 franchises from each tournament. But you could also do the game awards, tournament awards, award winners, tournament all-stars. So there's lots of way to generate this revenue, both for the franchises. So 50% to the franchise. It'd work the same as the playoff leasing system. 50% would go to the franchise, the owner of the Olympic franchise or World Junior franchise and their staff. The other 50% to the players that they draft on their roster. And you'd be drafting players, Dean. You'd take your first round pick from Canada, your second round pick from the US, your third round pick from Russia. You mix and match, right? You're building the best roster of players that are going to be at the World Juniors or at the Olympic tournament. And then, yeah, obviously you pay 50% out to the players. So the player who performs the best for you in the tournament is going to earn the biggest payout for the franchise or scout that owns them. And if one player gets hurt in the pre-tournament game and doesn't play at all, they wouldn't earn a payout, obviously. So very cool and innovative system to turn international events into dynasty fantasy leagues.
Wow, my mind is kind of just like spinning right now with the possibilities. I mean, you could be redrafting almost a full team every year for the World Juniors, save for a few of those guys that are returning. Now, a lot of the other countries have a lot more returning players than in Canada, as a lot of the Canadian returning players are heading on to pro, and some of those other countries guys play 2 or 3 years more often. So I think that's really, really neat. When you say you name your own, so you are not drafting Canada, you are drafting a franchise and then out of the blue creating a country and a logo. So, it could be Duck Island if I was doing something like that, or whatever it might be. It could be whatever you want, just like you're naming a franchise. I mean, that alone just brings in so many cool things. Like, can you imagine having one of your players, I'll use Colton Parayko, who is on my roster, if he's on the Canadian Olympic team at some point and then he's in that jersey, getting those players, much more reason for the players to get involved as NFTs with us as well, and giving it more utility in that regard. I mean, the ideas, they just keep exploding from Ultimate Franchise Fantasy Sports. And I can't imagine how much the bidding will be on some of those franchises. How many Olympic teams are we talking? Like 10?
Yeah, so 12 men's Olympics teams and 10 World Junior teams. Right. And those franchises would be forever. So you would, every time there was an Olympics every 4 years, you'd be in the tournament and you'd be eligible to win money. There would be an annual entry fee, obviously, like the current dynasty leagues, but there'd be prize pool. There'd be transactions throughout those 4 years figuring out who's going to be on your roster. And you're right, Dean, with the annual draft. The other thing to remember is from one tournament to the next, those lower countries face relegation and promotion. So there would be potentially, so say Denmark gets relegated after this year's World Juniors, obviously they'd have to win their way back. But if Latvia comes in instead of Denmark, you'd have to draft the entire Latvian roster would then get spread around. So there's going to be a pretty big draft every year, certainly for the World Juniors, but also for the Olympics, because some countries don't make it back the next time around, and the new country's entire roster would be available for draft then. So that's a very cool thing. Or if you're really high on Nikolai Ehlers and you own him and he's from Denmark, and Latvia makes it the next time around, maybe you want to keep Nikolai Ehlers and just waste the roster spot on him, stash him as a keeper, thinking Denmark's going to make it back before the end of his career, and he's still going to have value in that league. So very cool system. And again, the leasing part, Dean, I think is so huge, especially for the scouts, and especially if the World Juniors, a lot of those players are already on franchise protected lists because they're drafted in the NHL, but there are lots of top prospects. Shane Wright, these guys that are going to be your draft year guys especially, are at these World Junior tournaments in big roles. They're going to earn a payout, a leasing payout for the scout that owns them through the World Junior tournament. And then also, Dean, I think when you get down to that under 18 and Halinka, that whole draft class then has value, right? Because those are all your draft year kids. And because we don't currently have junior leagues up and running, I think national events are one way to really help scouts generate revenue from their players before they make it to the UFHL, as far as the entry auction, the UFHL's version of the NHL draft. And scouts were wanting more revenue streams. Well, here you go with the World Juniors, and certainly eventually the under 18 tournaments as well.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, there will be junior leagues eventually. This is a way to get there and have a little bit. But, I preach this, a little bit of faith, a little bit of patience with UFFS. There will be a delivery, and we're seeing it now. Creative minds are working on things, and not just for hockey. I mean, basketball, certainly, baseball, golf has so many international events. So you think about the Ryder Cup, the President's Cup, the Solheim Cup, the opportunities there. Football, maybe not as much international because it's such a North American, but football is such a beast on its own. It'll do just fine. But the possibilities are awesome. And the one thing that we haven't touched on that I thought was just an amazing OTGWG this past week was the Canadian women. And, there's got to be some possibilities there, Larry.
There is, and we've thought about this for a while, is how do we incorporate women's hockey? How do we launch women's hockey? Because they don't really have they have separate professional leagues and they're playing exhibitions and stuff. But in women's hockey, the biggest stage is the international events. So why not launch women's hockey for the Olympics this coming year? Because it's going to be such a huge tournament. And I think, again, Dean, the fact that Marie-Philippe Poulin, the bar down golden goal in this World Championships against the U.S. women, obviously the ongoing rivalry with Canada, USA, in women's hockey certainly sparked this idea or brought it back to the forefront. But the potential to do the exact same thing for women's hockey, Dean, would be to sell the equal number of franchises as the entries for the women's Olympic tournament, which would be 10, and draft those full rosters of all the women who make it to the Olympics. Obviously, Canada and U.S. are the powerhouses. You're going to want to load up on those franchises, but it'll really add a lot of exposure for women's hockey and get everybody learning some of these players from other countries, because there are some high, maybe they don't have the depth of Canada and U.S., but there are some star players that put up some pretty good numbers from a lot of other countries at the women's international events. But exactly the same thing. You draft all the players from the national team rosters for this year's Olympic participation, and then it would be reversed though, Dean. It would lease those women's rights to the leagues. So rather than waiting on the NHL or a real professional women's hockey league that a WNHL or whatever's in the works. I know the NHL has had extensive conversations about kind of taking over and putting the women's hockey under their umbrella, and they've incorporated women's stars in their skills competitions and stuff in recent years. I think that's inevitable. That's going to happen. But while we wait for that, it's a great time to really launch women's hockey through the Olympics. All the interest is there. The Olympics and the World Championships are the flagship events for women's hockey, more so than the domestic leagues, at least in the present. And one thing, Dean, that's important to note here is that thanks to our partnership, again, with Elite Prospects, all these women's hockey players are available through the Elite Prospects database. So even though we haven't allowed scouts or franchises to obviously own women's players to date, they are available. They are eligible to be owned on the UFS platform through the Elite Prospects database. So the scoring would need to be tracked via spreadsheet until the UFFS gameplay engine is ready to host women's hockey, because obviously Fantrax doesn't have a women's tournament, nor do they have an Olympics or a World Juniors. So Nathan Bender and the team that helps out with tracking stats and setting up, Nathan's a real Excel wizard and great with spreadsheets and being able to come up with a simplified scoring system for this first year to host, obviously, men's Olympics, women's Olympics, ideally, potentially, and the World Juniors for the men as well. So I think this is a real chance to be an innovator and revolutionize as far as dynasty leagues for international events, both for men and potentially for the women as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. And again, this is what it could bring for the players. I mean, there is money to be made. We can, like we are going to do with the real life athletes that sign up, funnel some of the fantasy profits back to them. This is another way where women's hockey players can get exposure. They can get some financial benefit from it, grow the league. I mean, the athletes that we're going to be able to help, I really, really am look forward to these initiatives that we're talking about. And, just the beginning. It's just amazing the things that are going on. So I can't wait for that. International events. You and I are the same mind. We love the World Junior, and I remember getting up at 3 in the morning with my dad to watch games when it's over in Europe. So the fact that you could possibly own one of those teams, and you're going to have to pony up, whether it's Olympics or a World Junior team. We talk about like the FOMO when it comes to not getting in some of our leagues. The FOMO is going to be on high alert with some of that stuff. So great stuff to the minds at the UFFS for coming up with this stuff, and the UFHL in particular. Do you want to get to some trades now? Not a busy week for trades, but we got a few of them.
Yeah, there ended up being 4 trades this week in the UFHL. There was a 4th one came in breaking news as we were starting the show today. One that I actually had in my notes, as I thought I was going to be the insider today and help break a trade, but it got approved and came out just before we started here. But we can start at trade 1, Dean. Obviously, the Blades of Steel and Mystics, mostly minor trades this week. Again, most of the franchises, I think, are fairly set for the upcoming season roster-wise. I don't think there'll be a ton of bombshells, but certainly this trade, a bit of an interesting one. The Blades of Steel needed a goaltender, Dean, because they lost Darcy Kemper in the expansion draft to the Bentley Jacks. And so they had a hole as their goalie number 2 behind Ilya Samsonov, and they've plugged that hole with Carter Hutton, who right now is in line to be the starter for the Arizona Coyotes, and also picked up rugged defenseman Josh Brown, who will benefit from block shots being added, might not benefit from penalty minutes value going down in the coming seasons, but gets Carter Hutton and Josh Brown in exchange for Tanner Jeanette, who's been a real emergence, bright spot, the revelation for Nashville, kind of forcing his way from undrafted junior to the NHL. As well as Juuso Riikola, who's been a depth defenseman for Pittsburgh, but has some potential offensive skill, some upside. And then the Blades of Steel gave up a 2022 second-round pick and 100 SCO score coins. So a trade there for Blades of Steel, primarily to address their goaltending behind Ilya Samsonov, getting Carter Hutton, and for the Mystics, getting a couple more young guys that are cheaper and could potentially fill roles going forward for their depth.
What's interesting about this is I was talking to both of these teams about the same goalie that we have. Both of them were interested in the particular goaltender, and it just didn't work out for whatever reason. So it's kind of interesting that I was negotiating with both of these teams, and then they hook up and make a deal. And that's often, quite often you're negotiating with more than one team on a particular player, and you should be, unless it's some sort of exclusivity, if you've really got down and you're just finalizing, you should probably always keep your options open with that one. But how about trade number 2?
Trade number 2, Dean, the Royals, they are really in win now mode. As we've seen, they've been very aggressive this offseason and trying to get a real deep supporting cast for their old guys. They got Alex Ovechkin, who does have a 5-year contract, but he's going to slow down at some point. They got Joe Thornton. They got some veteran guys. Add another name to the list, Alex Edler, who signed in Los Angeles. He's played his entire career in Vancouver. He's staying in the Pacific Division, but with the Kings, I think that's a great fit for Edler and certainly for the Royals. The Blizzard, on the flip side, they really are rebuilding. They're likely going to be a lottery team this coming season, or certainly in the bottom 10 of the standings. So they're stockpiling prospects for the future. They get 2 nice ones here with Samuel Helenius, who actually signed with Los Angeles already. I believe he's a 6'7" center, Dean. He's just a massive young kid from Finland. He's a man among boys in the junior level. We'll probably see him at the World Juniors. Kind of a shutdown 2-way center, but potentially some offensive upside there. And Blake Biondi, who's kind of the opposite. He's sort of an average-sized guy, but really high-end skill. He was the U.S. Minnesota Mr. Hockey Award winner 2 seasons ago as the top high school hockey player in Minnesota. So these are 2 quality prospects going back to the Blizzard in exchange for another veteran defender that's going to step in and help the Royals win now.
Very interesting. We are also hoping the Blizzard are a rebuilding team this year. Mystics and Stallions. The Mystics getting back into things.
Yeah, the Mystics were busy this week, Dean, including the 4th trade that we'll break or touch on as well. The Mystics are involved there too. So they gave us something to talk about this week. Colin Mills and the Mystics involved in 3 of the 4 trades. In this case, Colin Mills actually was with the London Knights doing some analytics work for the London Knights when Anthony Stolarz was the goalie with the London Knights when they had a lot of success. And it looks like he's going to be the backup to John Gibson in Anaheim, and we'll get somewhat of a work share there. He looked good in some call-ups at the end of the season. Obviously, he came through Edmonton and has kind of bounced around the NHL, but kind of like Jack Campbell, one of these guys getting to their mid to late 20s and are starting to emerge as a potential quality NHL goaltender, albeit a backup. In exchange for Gage Goncalves, another late bloomer out of the WHL, Dean, forward prospect that Al Murray and the Tampa Bay Lightning identified, and some thought they reached for him a bit at the end of the 2nd round last year in 2020, but certainly a prospect that continues to develop and is looking like another one of those next man up types in Tampa Bay, and 100 score coin going back to the Stallions. So they get a good forward prospect and a nice little bump in score coin in exchange for who would have been their 3rd goaltender in Anthony Stolarz. Lands with the Mystics to replace Carter Hutton, who obviously was just traded by the Mystics earlier in the trade recap for this week. And then the final trade, Dean, the Mystics sent Brandon Sutter to the Red Army in a 1-for-1 exchange for Jordy Ben. So Jordy Ben is going from the Red Army to the Mystics. And obviously Jordy Ben, these were teammates last year with the Vancouver Canucks. Brandon Sutter re-signed with Vancouver on a much more team-friendly contract. Obviously, he had the big cap hit. Now he's an affordable depth guy for Vancouver. And Jordy Ben signed for under $1 million with Minnesota and will have a decent role with the Minnesota Wild after they bought out guys like Ryan Suter and have kind of shaken up their defense. So Jordy Ben is now a Mystic, and Brandon Sutter is on his way to the Red Army as the 4th and final trade of the weekly recap in the UFHL.
Good for Colin Mills to make some noise. He doesn't make enough noise in this league, so he was busy this week and back with the Mystics back in the league now, making a lot of moves, and it's good to see. And I love the fact that we have a UFHL trade board bait sort of a Telegram group because we do get to find out. And I'll be honest, when I see a guy is out there, I immediately, if I'm interested, I'm immediately messaging that GM and saying, hey, let's talk. I actually did that this week with a couple of guys that we are going to be talking about on here because there are some interesting names and some big names on the trade bait board right now.
There are, Dean, and the biggest name at the top is Rob Love and the Tornadoes are shopping Jonathan Taves. They're wanting 2 forwards in return, so a 1 for 2, looking for more depth among their forward core. Obviously touting the Legends value for Jonathan Taves. Jonathan Taves missed the entire season, so he's been out for a full year with kind of a mysterious ailment, some sort of respiratory illness, but certainly looks like he's healthy this offseason, Dean. There's been photos surfacing of Jonathan Taves celebrating at teammates' weddings and looking like Jonathan Taves. So I think he'll be on the ice for training camp in Chicago. And I think he'll be rejuvenated coming off a year on the sidelines. And I think there's a lot of optimism about Chicago. I know Jonathan Taves was among that veteran group that wasn't too happy with the direction of the team going into more of a rebuild. Well, now they're reloading, albeit another key guy, Duncan Keith, is gone. And Corey Crawford had obviously retired the previous season or shipped out. But then you get guys coming in, Dean, like Seth Jones and Marc-Andre Fleury and up and down the lineup. Chicago has really started to plug some holes and looks like they're going to try and make some noise or make a run for it again. So Jonathan Taves is available from the Tornadoes. The Yetis, Dean, they got the green light to entertain offers on Brock Besser, as well as Neil Pionk, obviously Jets defenseman, and Mackenzie Blackwood, New Jersey goaltender, are also available. But Brock Besser's the big name there. Again, Colin Mills actually built that Yetis roster, and Brock Besser was a big part of it. Scott Lowater has taken over as GM there and really shook things up. Looking for hockey trades in return for Brock Besser, but also looking to shed a bit of salary. And the Yetis are one of those franchises that are dangerously close to the cap ceiling. With some extensions, guys like Sean Couturier getting a big contract last week. Now maybe you got to move up Brock Besser for a cheaper replacement among their forward group. The Stingrays, Arlo Scholz is testing the waters with Michael Matheson. Mentioned he'd like to swap him for a similar defender. Open to ideas. The Bentley Jacks, Dean, who we know Brendan Kopp's always busy. He's still shopping for upgrades for the UFHL expansion franchise, trying to finalize their opening night roster, offering up players like Pius Suter and Henrik Bjorkstrom, as well as defender Justin Falk and their first-round pick in 2022. Looking for an upgrade at either forward or defense and hoping that they'll make $4.5 million or less. And then, Dean, the Royals are still trying to trade Brandon Tanev. This is a running joke in the UFHL. The Royals and Arnie Entz and Brent Baldwin have been looking for a new UFHL home for Brandon Tanev dating back to before the trade deadline in April. Brandon Tanev's already found a new home in the NHL with the expansion Seattle Kraken. He's one of those players, Dean, that does hit a lot of categories in the UFHL, so I figured maybe we could name drop him here on UFHL Now and pump his value a little bit for Arnie, help them find a taker so we don't have to see the weekly or monthly Brandon Tanev mentions on the trade bait board. And last but not least, Dean, just officially as of last Saturday, there were no buyouts in the UFHL this offseason, so no franchises used a buyout. That deadline has now passed. So I thought that was interesting that you look at the NHL, how many buyouts are every offseason. There was none in the UFHL, which I guess shows that franchises are finding ways to trade those players, as we've seen with a number of players that were bought out or buyout candidates in the NHL. Jeff Skinner, among others, have been traded. Marc-Edouard Vlasic this offseason in the UFHL to avoid those buyout scenarios and that cap recapture penalty. So yeah, no buyouts in the UFHL this offseason was the other sort of big news of the week.
Yeah, and the buyouts are interesting because when you look at that buyout calculator, sometimes you're like, oh, that's not bad, and then there's a big number, right? As you go down, so you got to be really careful. We're hoping. We're hoping Jeff Skinner gets bought out at some point by the Buffalo Sabres, or else Duckmans might have to use a buyout on that situation. But this is the gamble you take when you trade for some of those contracts. We looked at the Sergei Bobrovsky contract as well as possibly if that one gets bought out, because I think that one's a lot more. So you have to gamble. You're taking a gamble when you're making those moves, and then if it doesn't work out, then you have to rely on the buyout situation. And then you're going to be criticized just like everybody criticizes the other GMs. You know, I don't know how many years Benoit Pouliot, he might still be on the Oilers buyout system or something like that, but you're always looking at those numbers years down the road. And so we're always mirroring and affected by the NHL, and that's the same thing when it comes to guys signing new deals, and that's why some of these teams get put into this situation where they don't have the cap space because one of their players just signed a new deal.
And it's been busy in the NHL, Dean. Even though these are kind of the dog days of summer, the NHL business never stops, nor does it in the UFHL. And there was a bombshell this past week, Dean. The hockey world is awaiting Montreal's decision, and I thought maybe that would happen as breaking news during our episode. The deadline is tomorrow. Montreal has to decide by mid-afternoon tomorrow, somewhere around 4 or 5 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, on the decision on Jesperi Kotkaniemi. Obviously, Carolina sent an offer sheet of 1 year at $6.1 million. Really shook up the hockey world. And Rock Republic in the UFHL, Kyle Roberts, also has a decision to make. So everybody's kind of waiting on what's going to happen with Montreal, either accepting the 1 year $6.1 million or taking the compensation, which would be a first-round pick and a third-round pick. I believe in this upcoming 2022 draft, which is a deep draft, but that's a big hole in their lineup to lose their third overall pick from a few years ago in Jesperi Kotkaniemi, who, as we know, Dean, this is retaliation for the Sebastian Aho offer sheet a couple of years back. And just the way it was delivered, right, with the announcement in French and literally copying and pasting the quote that Marc Bergevin used when he announced the Sebastian Aho offer sheet and throwing it right back in the face. Don Waddell used that exact same quote and just replaced the name with Jesperi Kotkaniemi. But I thought, Dean, the line of the week goes to Arnie Entz from the UFFS Hockey Chat. Arnie said, if nothing else comes of this, at least Tom Dundon has an awesome new nickname, Petty, Tom. Tom Dundon, obviously the owner of the Carolina Hurricanes, and then Tom Petty, we all know who Tom Petty is, but it generated a lot of chatter in the hockey world and certainly in the UFFS world, and we await that decision because it may impact whether or not, once that decision's made, Kyle Roberts will have 24 hours to accept or walk away from Jesperi Kotkaniemi in the UFHL for Rock Republic as well.
And then there'd be a bidding war because that would be very, very interesting. I love it. I think that maybe the Carolina Hurricanes might have went and tried to offer sheet a few other players if they wanted to, but they were making a point. And I think Tom Dundon, I think what the Carolina Hurricanes have done over the last number of years that he's been involved is really cool. You know, I've had a chance to talk to Jordan Martinook about being down there and what it's like and playing for this guy. I mean, Tom Dundon, he's going to be paying Kotkaniemi with some of the money Don Cherry helped him raise with a bunch of jerk shirts. I mean, this guy, all he does is take something and turn it into something good for his hockey team. And, you know, Kotkaniemi would be a good add to that hockey team. I think there were players that, you know, maybe if they really wanted to offer sheet, they could have targeted a little bit more, but I love the offer sheet. I think it should happen more. I don't know why there's this stupid unwritten rule or code or whatever you want to call it that GMs don't do it. It's not illegal. Take advantage of it. You know, be prepared for something coming back, but it should be something that teams should look at, especially a young team that's rebuilding or cap. I don't know why GMs don't. Well, I do know why they don't do it more, because they're scared of the retaliation, as we just saw. But it's great for us, man, and I think it's a tool that they should use more. But I love what Tom Dundon has done. So whether you call him Petty Tom or making money off other people Tom or whatever Tom, he's doing a pretty good job. So I think it was great, and listen, it gives us something to talk about. You know, who doesn't love a little bit of drama within the front office?
Yeah, the bunch of jerks is a great running joke, and they're living up to it, definitely. And I think, yeah, you know, I think you're right that the reason we don't see more offer sheets is because it is a bit of a code thing. And how are Marc Bergevin and Don Waddell going to share a press box, or what are they going to do when they arrive at the same owners meeting in Boca Raton, right? It is sort of frowned upon to use offer sheets. We all remember the barn fight with Kevin Lowe and Brian Burke over the Dustin Penner offer sheet. That was back in 2017, and that was the last successful offer sheet where a player was allowed to walk. So this is a rare thing, but it actually also triggered conversation amongst the UFHL brass. How could we incorporate offer sheets into the UFHL? Because right now we don't allow trades straight up for score coin, obviously, but maybe that's where your offer sheet comes in. You can make a score coin offer, but then how do you count? How do you match it? Do you have to donate that much score coin into the prize pool to keep the player? Or there's some logistics there, but we certainly had the conversation behind the scenes of, okay, how does this work in the UFHL? How do we incorporate an offer sheet for a UFHL player that is a pending RFA? Could somebody right now go to the Warriors and offer, 10,000 score coin for Elias Pettersson, and could he accept it? And then you'd also have to send him your draft picks. You'd have to have the draft pick compensation, and then you'd have to figure out the compensation levels, Dean. If it's, under 500 score coin, maybe you only give up a third round pick. If it's 10,000 or more score coin, maybe you give up your next 4 first round picks. But there are ways we could potentially build this into the UFHL. As rare as it is in the NHL, it could be an opportunity to sort of allow score coin direct for buying players that are pending RFAs. But again, it's very preliminary conversation, but we thought we did brainstorm it a bit because it is part of the NHL. It's in the rule book that you can make an offer on somebody's RFA, and maybe you allow that here. And then it would be, how do you match that? Is it that you have to contribute that much score coin to the prize pool to keep a player that you already own? But that's not necessarily fair, and you don't get to extend that player in advance so he doesn't turn.
That can't be done with this group. So bravo on those ideas. Now let's get to, before my internet cuts out, let's get to some of the signings this week that did impact UFHL teams. I got to get a new hamster for my internet.
Yeah, Dean, and now that we talked about offer sheets, I'm sure that the creative minds in the UFHL, somebody might come up with a proposal for next off-season's meetings to submit a way to incorporate offer sheets. But certainly Duckmans got some good news this week, Dean. Colton Parayko re-upped a long-term extension, 8 years, $6.5 million per for the St. Louis Blues. I know he was potentially a homecoming. There was lots of talk that he'd be back in St. Albert as a trade target for the Oilers because he was entering the final year of his contract, but now he's got some obviously long-term security there in St. Louis. And when you look at it, Dean, it does look cheap compared to Darnell Nurse in Edmonton at $9.25 million. I do think the ship has sailed about Parayko now coming to the Oilers. I think he's happy in St. Louis, obviously, to sign with that kind of term and money there. But that contract was really interesting, and I think you got to be happy at $6.5 million.
We are so happy. I mean, if you've ever met Colton Parayko, you will know he is one of the friendliest, nicest guys out there. And that's what he did here. He took a team-friendly deal to help out Duckman's domination. And, of course, probably the St. Louis Blues a little bit. But he sees the value in what he brings. He sees the value in not getting overpaid, so that just if you're just using the exact deal, so you've got about $3 million, a little bit less than $3 million to go out and spend on somebody else. If you're comparing it to a Darnell Nurse deal, I mean, that's a guy who sees the big picture, sees where he fits in, and sees how they can build around him. 8 times 6.5 is still a lot of money. He's obviously very comfortable and maybe wants to build a family there. So I love it. I'm very happy, and I'm really excited that it's also a deal that he doesn't have to have the weight of a $9 million deal. I think it's pretty honest. Colton Parayko didn't have the greatest year. He's not Dougie Hamilton. He might not be Darnell Nurse, so maybe he doesn't need to try to live up to a $9 million contract. Maybe he can just go about his business making $6.5 million and be really, really happy.
Yeah, I think there are some similarities to Darnell Nurse on the shutdown side, the size, the skating, but maybe not that level of offense, or certainly hasn't shown it yet, which makes up that extra $3 million. And again, I think there's some disappointed Oiler fans who really had eyes for Colton Parayko and a homecoming potentially. If St. Louis doesn't have success this year and starts to trend towards a rebuild, and maybe he's available at the trade deadline, I think there was a lot of chatter that he would be a target for Edmonton, but obviously cross that name off the list. But great news for Duckmans. Another defender, Dean, that is somewhat similar as sort of more of a shutdown type guy is Conor Murphy of Rock Republic. Signed a 4-year extension at $4.4 million in Chicago. And this is where we come into that block shots, the value of hits, the value of penalty minutes, and does he provide enough fantasy value for that cap hit? And again, that really depends on what happens in these upcoming rounds of voting, and takes us back to how important it is to vote, and not selfishly. Don't vote a certain way because you have Connor Murphy, but these votes really will determine these player values in the UFHL going forward. But Connor Murphy gets 4 years at 4.4, and then some of the RFAs, Dean, are starting to get crossed off quite rapidly here. Joel Farabee of the Generals in Philadelphia got 6 years at $5 million per. And Drake Batherson of the Tornadoes almost got the identical deal in Ottawa, 6 years at 4.975. So obviously comparables there. Eli Tolvainen of the Titans was sort of the one that stood out to me, Dean, this week, was a 3-year extension at $1.45 million. When it said 3 years at 4.25 total, or whatever the total was, I thought that might have been the AAV. So David Poyle works the magic there, got a steal of a deal for Jacob Cambridge and the Titans, and certainly Eli Tolvainen looked like this past season a guy that's going to put up points and score some goals and be a power play contributor in Nashville. Elsewhere, Dean, the Islanders signing spree. We were all waiting for Lou Lamoriello to do something this offseason, and he pumped out 4 signings in a matter of one day, all in the same press release. So Kyle Palmieri of the Grizzlies got 4 years at $5 million. Anthony Beauvillier of the Mystics got 3 years at 4.15. Ilya Sorokin of the Royals got 3 years at $4 million. And Casey Zizekas of Dynasty got 6 years at $2.5 million. And the Islanders aren't done there, Dean. It also came out that Zach Parise of the Warriors has a contract in place with the Islanders. We're just awaiting the term and the cap hit, but expected to be a discounted deal. Obviously, Zach Parise's getting compensated by the Minnesota Wild from his buyout. It's expected to be a cheap, team-friendly contract to reunite Zach Parise with Lou Lamoriello from their Devils days. Elsewhere, the Sabres locked up 2 of their key building blocks. Casey Middlestad of the Godfathers and Henry Jokiharju of Kamikaze. They got identical 3-year extensions with $2.5 million cap hit. And another RFA, Dean, that got crossed off as breaking news today was Philip Hronek of Strong Island has signed a 3-year extension with the Detroit Red Wings for $4.4 million. RFAs are a big talking point, though, still, Dean. Kirill Kaprizov, he's back in Russia right now. He flew home for a bit, but he hasn't got that big mega deal done with Minnesota, who offered him a long-term, I think 8 years at over $9 million, and he didn't sign it. He's still waiting for the $10 million or whatever the case is there. Both Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes in Vancouver, Brady Tkachuk in Ottawa, and there was a report today that he's getting frustrated that this deal isn't done yet. Training camp's only 2 weeks away now, Dean. In less than a little over 3 weeks, we'll be playing preseason hockey. So these guys got to get these contracts done. Rasmus Dahlin in Buffalo and Kaylor Yamamoto in Edmonton. And I think Kaylor Yamamoto, you look at career stats with Joel Farabee, they're almost equivalent at this point. So I think he's probably eyeing that Farabee-Batherson type contract in Edmonton. But by all reports, Ken Holland's offering him more so what he gave Jesse Puljujarvi, which is more like $1.2 million on a bridge, a 1 or 2 year contract. So that'll be interesting. Robert Thomas in St. Louis, and last but not least, Nolan Patrick in Vegas, who was a brief member of Duckman's domination this offseason. I believe he was flipped to the Godfathers, I think, in the Dougie Hamilton deal. But certainly Nolan Patrick, Kelly McCrimmon, and his agent have to hammer out that deal. They go way back to Brandon. So I would assume that deal comes in similar to a Casey Middlestad, kind of that 3-year, 2.5 type deal. The other one that made news, or 2 more that made news this week, Dean, were Thomas Hertl of the West Coast Express, possibly wanting out of San Jose. He's entering his final season. He's a pending unrestricted free agent at $5.625 million. Apparently, Thomas Hertl is not a fan of Evander Kane or the way that situation's playing out in San Jose, and he's really entering this season with a wait and see what's happening. I don't think he's talking extension, and obviously he'd be available to the highest bidder. He'd be one of the bigger names because he's still a young guy on the UFA market next summer. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Thomas Hertl. And last and maybe least, Dean, is Jack Johnson of Strong Island. A lot of people thought Jack Johnson's career was over. He may be able to extend it. He's getting a PTO professional tryout with Colorado. No relation to Eric Johnson, who's obviously also in Colorado. Eric Johnson, Jack Johnson came into the league around the same time, I think a year apart. But certainly Jack Johnson trying to earn a role in Colorado as a depth defender. But those were the names and the contracts and roster moves that stood out in the NHL and how they'll impact the UFHL from the past week.
Well, nice to see Lou Lamoriello saving on paper with getting everything done, and he has to only put out one press release, so that works out well. And I didn't realize until just a few seconds ago just how year-round the NHL and the UFHL is. When you said we're going to have preseason games in about 3 weeks or whatever, I'm like, didn't we just finish August? Like, it's still sunny outside, man. Like, how is this? It just dawned on me how this is a 12-month a year. Like, I was thinking, okay, I'm going to have a few weeks to put my feet up. No, you're going 12 months a year, and that's the awesome thing. So, wow, it really did dawn on me. As much as we talk about it, it dawned on me now that this whole summer we've been dealing with hockey issues, and we still will, just like they do in the NHL.
And Dean, so not next weekend, but the weekend after, training camps open in the NHL. And the weekend after that, the preseason starts. It's 22 sleeps till the first preseason games, I believe, on September 25th. So, we're 22 sleeps away from preseason hockey. And just 2 weeks from today, training camps will be opening in the NHL and players will be reporting. So all these RFAs hoping to get deals done so we don't have any holdouts at the start of training camp. But it's going to be busy 2 weeks for news in the NHL. And as NHL franchises, much like UFHL franchises, try and put the finishing touches on their opening night rosters.
Man, awesome. Thanks so much for doing this live today. We took you a little bit longer than we normally do, but big news. I mean, the international stuff, that is so amazing. And then the fact that we had pretty good voter turnout, still room to improve.
Shame.
We're going to have that shame bell going as long as people keep missing it. But we were close. We were really close. And I look forward to the next meetings being even better. Thanks so much, Larry. We'll let you go. And I know you have a whole lot of other stuff to do. And I'll be right back after this to wrap up the show.
You're watching the Ultimate Fantasy Sports Network. UFSN, your one-stop fantasy shop. Get in touch on Twitter at UFS Network. Email us, ufsn@uffsports.com.
Wow. That was one hell of an insider segment. I cannot wait. I'm still blown away and my head is buzzing about this international tournament stuff. Men's, women's, and then you look at other sports. Oh my goodness, this is so awesome. Love it. Okay, as Larry mentioned, our next ownership meeting is September 11th. Really try to be there. But if you can't be there, tremendous minutes and a recording is available. There's zero excuse to miss out on what happened at a meeting. If you're not there, you can't ask questions, unfortunately, but you can ask questions after by listening to it. I really implore everybody, don't wait till that 24-hour voting period to learn about what you're voting for. I promised I wouldn't rant. Okay, we got the UFFS podcast this Sunday. Darren and Larry chatting Ultimate Fantasy League Baseball. Looking forward to telling everybody, and hopefully one of my team members will be able to join me as well. Then we have 2 Minute Tuesday with Darren Bates, and UFAFL Nation on Tuesday with Mike Skrzniak, and who knows who's going to be joining him on this week. I think it's a very prominent UFAFL owner. Don't want to spoil it for Skriz at all, but that's going to be really exciting. All right. Larry mentioned that we might not see a whole lot more trading, but I will tell you, Duckman's Domination, still open to a few deals. There are some that we've been discussing. Feel free to circle back. You know who you are. We do have some room to make a few more moves before the start of the season. And there are a few things, and some of those players that are on the trade block we will be looking to get in on again. Have yourself a great weekend. It's a long weekend, everybody. It's a huge one in Canada. I'm going to be watching the Dodgers and the Giants all weekend long, and, of course, the Bombers. Hopefully they take out the Riders on Sunday. Thanks very much for joining us in this live edition of UFHL Now here on UFSN. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a great weekend.
UFHL Now is produced by DM Productions. To get in touch, head to www.podcastalley.ca.